On September 20th, 2017, satellite imagery shows a monster storm, Hurricane Maria, churning over the Caribbean. On the ground, the sky fell on Puerto Rico. Archival footage captures the fury of a Category 4 storm as 155-mile-per-hour winds rip across the island. And it wasn't just the wind or the rain. It was a total system collapse. The storm shredded the island's already crumbling electrical grid, plunging 3.2 million American citizens into darkness. What came next was the longest and largest blackout in modern U.S. history. For days, then weeks, then months, the power stayed off. In some mountain towns, it would be almost a year before the lights flickered back on. This is a story about what happens when the systems we all depend on just vanish. It's about being forgotten. But more importantly, it's about what one small, overlooked community did when they decided they wouldn't be victims. They weren't going to wait for a rescue that wasn't coming. Instead, they were going to build their own future, one solar panel at a time. Can you imagine the silence that follows? The kind of deep, unnerving quiet you see in photos of the aftermath, a world plunged into darkness. No electricity means shots of families gathered around candlelight. No refrigerators, no fans, no lights. No power means the pumps that deliver running water just stop. No power means no communication. Cell towers are dark, the internet is gone. For hundreds of thousands in Puerto Rico, this wasn't for an afternoon. This was their reality for months. In the mountainous region of Humacao, in a tiny community called Mariana, the isolation was absolute. Washed-out roads and collapsed bridges left them stranded. Aid was nowhere to be seen, and the government, both local and federal, seemed to have forgotten they even existed. It was right there, in the suffocating darkness and the crushing silence, that a radical idea was born. Not from a government agency or some billion-dollar corporation, but from the people themselves. The collapse. To really get what happened in Mariana, you first have to see what Puerto Rico's power grid looked like even before the storm. Picture a relic, sprawling, rust-colored power plants, on average 44 years old. Compare that to the mainland U.S., where the average is 18. The utility company was bankrupt, and years of neglect had left the system, in its own words, degraded and unsafe. The grid was a complex, centralized web of high-voltage lines stretched over mountains and remote terrain, a design notoriously terrible for a place that gets hit by hurricanes. So when Maria hit, it didn't just damage the system, it annihilated it. The storm was the final knockout punch to a structure that was already falling apart. News reports from the Times show hospitals struggling to keep life-saving machines running on backup generators. We see images of families trying to keep medicine like insulin cold in coolers. Getting clean water became a daily battle. The official death toll, first reported in the dozens, was later found to be in the thousands. Many of those deaths weren't from the storm itself, but from the endless, grinding lack of electricity and basic services that followed. In Mariana, a community with a long history of solving its own problems, things were dire. They were completely cut off. Christine Nieves, a community organizer there, remembers the overwhelming feeling of being abandoned. But in Puerto Rican culture, there's a word, resiliencia. Resilience. It's a spirit of finding a way forward, no matter what. The people of Mariana had faced challenges before, from water shortages to economic neglect. They knew better than most that when official help doesn't show up, you have to rely on each other. The spark of mutual aid. 10 days after the storm, with no end to the darkness in sight, Christine Nieves, her husband, and other community members did something simple but profound. In photos and home videos from those days, you see them. They started a kitchen. They called it Proyecto de Apoyo Mutuo Mariana, the Mariana Mutual Support Project. It started with the basics. You see neighbors lined up, sharing a hot meal, the first for many days. At its peak, this little grassroots kitchen was serving up to 500 meals a day. And it wasn't charity, it was solidarity. People brought whatever they had, food they couldn't cook, a few dollars, their own skills, and they worked together. That kitchen became the heart of everything. It was where you could see neighbors reconnecting, sharing news, and getting organized. Paramedics, nurses, and doctors started showing up to help. It was a living, breathing example of mutual support, a system built on trust when every other system had failed. But while a hot meal was essential, it was a daily fix. The root of their problem was still there: the lack of power. People were washing clothes by hand in the river. They couldn't charge a phone to find family. They couldn't power a fridge to keep food and medicine from spoiling. That's when the thinking started to shift. The community realized they couldn't just sit around and wait for the old, broken grid to be put back together. That system had failed them once. It would fail them again. They didn't want to just recover. They wanted to build something better. Something that belonged to them. Something that would last. They didn't just need power. They needed power over their own future. The idea wasn't just to get the lights back on. The idea was to build their own solar-powered microgrid. Building a new kind of power. The vision was audacious. A solar microgrid is basically a self-sufficient power system. It can work completely on its own, separate from the main grid. For Mariana, it meant creating their own reliable electricity using solar panels and batteries. It was an energy insurrection, a declaration of independence from a fragile system they couldn't trust. You can see the transformation in photos. The community took over an abandoned, graffiti-covered school and began turning it into a vibrant community hub, a centro de apoyo mutuo. This building would be the heart of their new grid. First up was communication. A donor heard what they were doing and funded a team of volunteers who installed a solar-powered Wi-Fi system. Suddenly, Mariana was reconnected to the world. That one created this incredible sense of possibility. If they could build their own internet, why not their own power? Organizations like the Footprint Project and Mutual Aid Disaster Relief stepped in, not as saviors, but as partners. They brought the technical know-how and helped raise money for the gear. The community provided the labor, the local knowledge, and the absolute refusal to give up. Images show the work in progress. Community members, not professional crews, on the roof, installing rows of solar panels. They set up racks of powerful batteries to store the sun's energy, making sure the power would stay on day and night, rain or shine. This was so much more than an engineering project. The center, now running on sunshine, was transformative. And then you see the results. Footage of washing machines spinning in a community laundromat. The hum of refrigerators stocked with vital medicines. A bank of power strips with phones and medical gear, all charging up. It lit up the space for gatherings and workshops. It became a beacon of hope. And in the years that followed, whenever the main grid would inevitably fail again, the lights at the Centro de Apoyo Mutuo stayed on.